So now that you are coming to the end of the color correction module, our module 3, we want to talk about making it pop out from the frame. So this module were all about the usage of white balance, primary wheels, and everything you need to prepare your clip in the best way, and being conscious on how to use the software in the best way and the smartest way to be ready for the color grade. But making it pop out from the frame, it's terminology that I use a lot when you want to enhance your image and when you want to, create that kind of depth between colors and contrast and the depth that an image creates. Obviously, the first thing is that you have to shoot an image with that terminology of complementary colors, like this one, when you have, I don't know, different colors or different values in terms of lights that create already depth, and you just have to help them out to pop. But there are also few things to know when you are into the color correction phase to make your image stand out. So we are into the blue project. I am on the clip number 10, and I'm gonna loop them, disabling the audio. So right now I want to create a really fast grade with my primary wheels and check if my white balance is fine, and check if I have to do something before my color correction, before my grading. So I will start with the lift. I'll crank the lift down just right there. I will crank up the gain just a bit, and we'll push the gamma down. And for this node I am okay. On the second node I want to tweak the contrast up. I want to exaggerate that, and then I want to play with the pivot. And the fact number 1, when it comes to make it pop out, it comes to contrast. As you can see, just by moving the contrast and the pivot, everything is changing from my subject to the background. Just watch how the pivot change, how everything changes in the image. The pivot is basically, as we saw on that gradient on some lessons ago, it's basically changing that S curve into my curve, S contrast curve, making it smoother or harder. And if we focus on highlights and mids, we can see how it's affecting our image. So let's take that frame right here. Let's see where the contrast really take place, like there. And let's start playing with the pivot. Just look how the image start from washed out, completely washed out, to being really serious, and where that S curve is starting to separate my blacks from my mids to my highs. Look at that. And the first thing that you have to know is to settle the right point for your contrast and the pivot just after creating a standard balance. So my first node, I normally make a standard grade. I'm not overthinking on this first node, and then I start playing hard with the contrast. Playing hard in terms of time, playing hard in terms of taking that time in a serious way. I want to analyze my image, and I want to set it at the right point, because tweaking the contrast in the great way is like making 25 to 30% of the right work. So just look at disabling this. We have done a really great job just by tweaking the contrast. It's obvious that we can tweak that and do magic with this even by tweaking the curve. I can create another node and just disabling this and doing the exact same thing just with a normal curve. So I can put my 3 points, and by the way, I want to link my RGB and my blacks. I'm gonna set 3 points, gonna tweak the blacks, and then the highlights like there. I want also to set a lower rate to my highs there, and then I want to play with my gamma and my mids. It's the exact same thing, but you know, working with the contrast and the pivot, it's easier in my opinion. It's easier and it lets you focus a lot on the image. Normally with the micro or the mini panel, I'm used to just looking at the image and tweaking the contrast and the pivot with my left and right hand, just looking at the image. And yeah, that's the first thing to do if you want to make it stand out and pop out. I missed the white balance part. I didn't do a white balance part because this image has already good white balance, so I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. And so as always, I start with primaries and then contrast. Third thing to make it pop out is obviously saturation. So as we're working with different colors or different tonals, we want to work with the right saturation. So I'll start cranking the saturation up. And in an image like this one, you don't need to do that much. It's okay even there. We can also play again with the gain, cranking this down. And nothing more than that. As you can see, just contrast and saturation played the greatest combo. Lowering the gain is lowering my height, so my blue are popping out the most, because one thing that you have to know is that if you crank up the luminance, I'll do that as an example there on hue versus luminance, but we will look at that on the color grading part. If I crank up luminance, I will lose saturation on this part, or better, let's work just on this cyan blue part. I will lose saturation, but I will crank, up details on my image. If I'll crank down the gain, it will be the equivalent of doing this, making my cyans deeper. In this case, we can create, a poppy effect, by, gaining this up a bit, but it works also by gaining this down. But I think, yes, I'll leave this here. And so working with luminance, contrast, and color is the main thing. As a final touch to this thing, so by the way, I'm gonna select and deactivate that and activate that, and you can see the big difference. And as final thing, I normally use, to make it stand out, the midtone details and the details from the blur part. The midtone details are great because as clarify or clarity in Photoshop, it will help boosting up the whole image. You want to exaggerate with that, like start from 15 or 70, like this. Then you go down and you see how it affects the image. I will park it at 45 and let's see a before and after. It works really great. Let's look at this on a closer look, before and after. And then I'm gonna add on the same layer some details by going down to 46. Before and after. And let's look at our image. And that's the simple way on how you make color correction pop out, because we didn't grade the image, we are just correcting the image. So just pressing Option D, I'm deselecting everything, and look at this. Obviously I want to erase that one, or it was that one. No, it was that one. The before and the after. Let's look at this. So remind all of those things. First one, it's a contrast. Having a great contrast in your image help you to make colors and dark and white areas to stand out. So start after your primary method to work with contrast and your pivot there, or just with the curve. Then then pass directly playing with saturation and colors, and then with midtone details. These three guys were at the best way. So just look at that once again. And yeah, just look at these white and black areas, how this change. Just be focused on that when you're color correcting. Right now we've been even too strong. In my opinion, we should have been something like around something like this, and we could, you know, push this even further during the color grading part. But by the way, this is the best way to make your image pop out. And always remember, by the way, that above these tools you have to think about the initial image, and so you have to do tweaks, you have to do everything you need to make a great image. But by the way, start with a great image if you can. If you can't, you have all your necessary tool to make the image stand out right into DaVinci Resolve.